Okay, I am joined by senior writer for Hero Sports, Sam Herder. Give him a follow on Twitter at Sam Herder. Sam, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
No, I sincerely appreciate this because I love college football in all of its forms, and the lower divisions you get a different kind of culture altogether, and you have the one that everybody knows with North Dakota State and James Madison, and you have the ones that people don't like, say Duquesne, right? And I'm an HBCU fanboy, so all of my HBCU schools play FCS football. But I wanted to talk with you because with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 going to conference-only slates, it's really going to hurt FCS programs. And so, what first have you heard from some of those athletic directors and assistant ADs who helped put together these games where a lot of their budget is caught up in these one or two or three games?
Yeah, there's some definite worry going on just because I mean these FCS programs, they are they don't like when you call them small schools, but they are small schools compared to the FBS big boys. When you look at just the size of the fan base and the size of the stadium and facilities, but especially the size of the athletic budgets, and whereas FBS teams they have an athletic budget of 50, 60, 70 million dollars, sometimes even more. If you have an athletic budget of 20 plus million dollars in the FCS, you're doing well. But most of these programs, athletic departments, they have an athletic budget between 10 to 20 million dollars. So when you're just grabbing one off the list, when you're Southern Illinois and you're playing at Wisconsin, and all of a sudden you're not going to make that $500,000 anymore, that's a lot of money for their football budget and their athletic department. And that's not something where they can just, it's not like they're Ohio State and they can just turn somewhere else and find that $500,000 no problem. So there is worry about how they're going to make up that money. A lot of these FCS teams, they schedule these FBS opponents not only for the experience for the fans and the players and the coaches, but the number one thing is to get some money to operate. And you look at a team like Portland State, the Big Sky, they're like a lot of FCS teams where they schedule two FBS opponents, and they're basically saying, I mean, more than likely, these are going to be two losses, but, we're going to make $1 million off of these two games, and we need that to cover our travel expenses and stuff like that. And with that money not being there, there is that worry of, I mean, how in the world are we going to make up this money?
Yeah, so last year, that game for Oklahoma, where I'm from, and that's the team here, was South Dakota, and they're supposed to play Iowa State this year, which is still, again, we're counting on it as of today when we're talking, but that's a tremendous amount of money, even as Iowa State, to put a number on it, has an operating cost of about $86 million for its athletic department this year, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what, just listen to you, between 8 and 4 times as much as some of these FCS programs.
Yeah.
And one of those teams this year is Missouri State, which plays in a tremendously tough conference. That Missouri Valley Conference is just ridiculous. But there's been some conversation about how that game gets played because they're looking at $600,000 that they make from this. And according to herosports.com, where I'm getting this information, you should all go check it out, North Dakota State was only getting about $50,000 more to go play Oregon. So it's not a small amount of money, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a big chunk of change for these FCS programs, and I know a lot of people ask, what's the point even of Power 5 scheduling FCS opponents, and it is a financial thing where it is cheaper for Oklahoma to schedule an FCS team, which is still Division I and still counts, toward you being bowl eligible and stuff like that. It's cheaper to schedule a Missouri State rather than a Group of 5 team, because you can maybe pay Missouri State, whatever it is, $500,000. Meanwhile, if you try to schedule a Group of 5 opponent, they might be looking for a $1.2 million payout or stuff like that. So that's a big reason why Power 5 schedules the FCS. It's quote unquote, it's cheaper to pay these FCS opponents. But I mean, while $500,000 might not seem like a lot of money for Oklahoma, that's for a lot of FCS teams. That's that money is essential for them to cover their costs of playing a football season.
I'm thinking about this from the standpoint of an FCS school and what it might mean for the Football Oversight Committee to allow FBS teams to count not one but two wins against FCS opponents this year toward bowl eligibility. And then we had this move by the Big Ten and the Pac-12. What's the feeling among FCS teams? Do you think that we're going to see cancellation of seasons, say in the Big Sky or in the Missouri Valley Conference?
I think the last resort, the last resort would be to cancel the entire 2020, 2021 football season in this academic year. But the last I heard, the last resort still is to play a spring football season. The FCS is going to do everything in their power to play in the fall. It might be something where, FCS teams also go regional a little bit. It might not be, a conference only schedule, but it might be something where, some teams from the Big Sky and some teams from the Missouri Valley, if they're somewhat close to each other regional wise, they might play. Same with, there might be a SoCon team that's relatively close to an OVC or a Southland team, and maybe they get something on the schedule. So, everything I hear is the FCS is still, eyeing having a football season this fall outside of the Ivy League and the Patriot League. Those are two conferences that push the season back to the spring, but they're kind of on the smaller end when it comes to FCS conferences. But the main ones like the CAA, the Valley, and the Big Sky, they still are eyeing this fall to find a way to play. And if that doesn't happen, then they'll push things back to the spring, and hopefully this country is in a bit of a better shape than what it is now to safely play football.
I would be remiss if I did not ask you about your impressions of Trey Lance and what this season might do to his draft stock, knowing that the one opportunity he was going to have for certain to show off in front of what I thought was going to be a nationally televised audience has been taken off the table in Oregon. But the room is NFL scouts really loved him. One on record, Daniel Jeremiah, has thought the world of him, and going into this season, he had a higher grade on Trey Lance than he had Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence. Just didn't see him make any mistakes and didn't see him check down the ball. He was really accurate and was dynamic as a runner. I've only seen him the once, man. I saw him in the national championship game, right? And what I saw I liked, but it was also it was a weird game, right? What are your impressions of Trey Lance?
Yeah, he's the real deal. There's no doubt about that. That national championship game, if that is the only one you watch of Trey Lance, you might not see the hype like these other guys have, right, like these other guys do, just because Trey was asked to carry the ball 20 times or however much it was a game. And I think he only passed the ball 12 or 13 times and completed 7 or 8 of them. So you look at 8 of 13 passing for 100 and some yards. Nothing special there, but he did, carry the ball quite a bit and did his damage with his legs. And that was kind of the game plan with that game. But if you just look at his body of work throughout the season, you can see the arm talents when he does use it. He's a great athlete. He can scramble and run, great size, kind of a thick lower body. So he's a durable guy as well. And, right now I live in the Minneapolis area, but I know North Dakota State pretty well. I lived in Fargo from about 2011 to 2014, and I lived there again in 2016 and 2017. So, I've seen Easton Stick play in person quite a bit. I've seen Carson Wentz play in person. He was at North Dakota State. And, Trey Lance I wouldn't say he has the raw abilities of a Carson Wentz, but Trey Lance is already ahead of where Easton Stick is at, where Easton Stick was at as a senior. And Easton Stick was drafted in the 5th round,
right,
I believe.
Right, to the Chargers.
To the Chargers. And Easton Stick is already, kind of past where he was at as a senior. And obviously Lance is only going to be a redshirt sophomore. So, he has all the tools that you need. I'd be lying if I said that, Trey Lance is going to be in the discussion to be a first round pick in 2021. I kind of viewed it as, all right, by the time Lance is a junior or senior, he's going to start getting, some pretty heavy NFL hype. But that's already started after his redshirt freshman year. Yeah, he's good, man. He's a legit NFL first round draft pick prospect.
James Madison at North Carolina, with James Madison having just been a national championship game. I got that right, right? I'm not screwing that one up? Okay, cool.
Yep.
I'm back on track. So James Madison and North Carolina, I think, could be a really great game because North Carolina was really a point away from beating a team that played for a national championship and went on a run of about 29 straight. But James Madison looks like they have the tools to at least make it into a ball game. Now, that said, West Virginia was able to beat them last year, so there are people that are going to thumb their nose at this game, but I'm excited about it, especially since, the ACC hasn't moved to conference members only yet.
Yeah, and James Madison is a premier team when it comes to the FCS, and it's probably one of the more well-known just brands and programs that people recognize when they see James Madison. And I think JMU and North Carolina, the last they played was I want to say it was in 2016, and that was the year that James Madison beat North Dakota State in the semifinals and went on to win the national championship. And, North Carolina won that one pretty handedly. And so, there is kind of that, there still is that gap as far as, overall depth between these two teams. But yeah, I was very much looking forward to, and hopefully still can watch this game in 2020 between JMU and North Carolina, just because the Dukes, they had a ton of senior talents from last year's team that was very close to beating North Dakota State. They lose a lot of that, and so I feel like this North Carolina game is going to be a good measuring stick. And from a perspective of someone that covers the FCS, we're all really interested in this Dukes team just to see, how do they replace a ton of all-conference and all-American guys, and how do they stack up with a good Power 5 program like North Carolina. So hopefully we still can watch that game. So I think that would be a pretty fascinating matchup with how they line up physically.
Yeah, man. North Carolina does not have an easy win on the schedule this year at all. That's not how you draw that up. It's kind of like what Oregon had drawn up, where we're going, you guys got Ohio State and North Dakota State on the same, back-to-back weeks. What are we doing here? What are we doing? But no, to the North Dakota State bit, I do want to talk about Jibreel Cox, because for some people that is the biggest grad transfer win of the offseason, him transferring from one national champion to another national champion, where he's probably going to be the starting middle linebacker. And just in talking a little bit with people about him coming up in Raytown in Missouri and then getting up to North Dakota State and being a finalist for the Buchanan Award. I think finalist, didn't win it, right? Or did he?
He was a finalist.
Okay,
award.
Right. So I'm skittish because I made that really bad mistake. So now I'm skittish. But no, it's really difficult for me to project what somebody's going to be punching up in that way, because you're going from the most dominant team in the division to the defending national champion of college football in the most dominant league in college football. What do you think is going to happen with him in LSU?
Yeah, I think he's. I would be shocked if he isn't starting there. I know they have some holes to fill at linebacker. I think he will be one of those starters. Bo Pelini, the new defensive coordinator for LSU, he was formerly the head coach at Youngstown State, the same conference as North Dakota State. So, Bo just absolutely loves Jibreel Cox. So there's kind of that connection right there as far as how Jibreel ended up at LSU. But, I've had a chance to talk to Jibreel a couple of times back when he was playing for the Bison. And, the whole time he was there, kind of his backstory is I believe he had a knee injury his junior year of high school, and that kind of, scared off a lot of FBS teams, and he ended up at North Dakota State. And he did redshirt his first year at North Dakota State, but you could kind of hear whispers and, coaches kind of nudging you and saying that Jibreel Cox guy, yeah, he definitely shouldn't be here. He should be playing in the Big 12 somewhere. And so, his redshirt freshman year, he plays as a Big Ten contributor. He's an All-American by the time he's a sophomore, and last year as a junior. And kind of entering last year, my thought was, I bet there's a 50-50 chance that Jibreel plays for NDSU in 2020. And my thought was, he would declare early for the NFL draft, because I thought he could be a top 90 prospect. I didn't really see him grad transferring. I kind of figured he would declare early for the NFL draft if he did decide to leave. But I just think that opportunity came open for him, and he his big reason was he wanted to improve his NFL draft stock. And no matter how good North Dakota State is, no matter the fact that Easton Stick and Carson Wentz came from there. Even if he does test well, there still is that, even if he did test well at the combine, there still is that small school label around him. And I think if he goes to LSU and he's a big time contributor, that kind of, it finalizes the fact that he is potentially a day two or maybe even a day one NFL draft pick.
We talked about Trey Lance and we've talked about Jibreel Cox. Is there one guy playing FCS football right now that you have circled to watch when the NFL draft comes around in April because of what you think he might be able to do this season?
Yeah, there are a couple of offensive linemen in the Missouri Valley Football Conference that are really highly viewed from the NFL circles. One is a North Dakota State player. He's the left tackle. His name is Dylan Radens, and the director of the Senior Bowl. His name Jim Nagy, I believe.
Yeah,
his name is.
Right.
He is. Absolutely. He absolutely loves Dylan Radens, and he says he has the potential to be a top 100 draft pick. So, I mean, right there, you could look at next year's draft, and you could have Trey Lance, the quarterback. You could have left tackle Dylan Radens. You could have former NDSU linebacker Jibreel Cox all being drafted in 1, 2, and 3 rounds, which would be pretty remarkable and unheard of when it comes to the FCS. So Dylan Radens is a guy to keep an eye on. And also Drew Hillman, he's another left tackle in the Valley. He plays for Illinois State. He's 6'10", 310
Good
some.
God.
He might be up to 320 by now, but he still has a pretty. He looks skinny. That's how tall he is. He's over 300 pounds, but he still looks skinny just because he is 6'10". But I've had a chance to do a story with him, and he has a basketball background. He had an offer to play college basketball at Northern Illinois, but he always felt that football was his sport, and he certainly made the right decision there because now he's viewed as a high-end NFL draft pick from the FCS. So big guy, really good athlete, great feet. I think if he has, hopefully he can play. I know Illinois State was scheduled to play Illinois, I believe, and obviously that game is canceled. But I do know the Redbirds have played FBS opponents in the past, and that's something a lot of NFL scouts look at. That's the first film they look at is how did he do against FBS opponents.
I have a buddy whose oldest son plays ball at Drake, and I nickname him FCS Jerry because whenever we would talk, we would end up talking about Drake Bulldogs and what San Diego used to be and all of these other schools that don't get a whole lot of attention. And I wanted to ask you specifically about Drake. What are your expectations for them this season, if any?
Yeah, the Pioneer Football League is such an interesting football league, and the fact that they are non-scholarship, they are pretty spread out. You have teams in California. In California, you have teams in the Midwest. You have teams down south a little ways. So, it is really an interesting league. Drake has been competitive. They've made some pretty good improvements over these last few years. But when it comes to the PFL, everything goes through San Diego. The Toreros there's something on like a 30-some game winning streak within the conference. And that's kind of what everyone is reaching is to reach San Diego's level. And Drake has been, toward the top half of the conference standings. Like I said, they've made some pretty good improvements these last couple of years. But the Pioneer Football League is, when it comes to FCS conferences, they are near the bottom. So it is just a one bid league when it comes to sending teams into the playoffs. So Drake's main goal is obviously to win that conference title, then see what they can do in the playoffs to, kind of show nationally, what they're able to do.
I only had one more question for you, and you kind of hit on it with the playoffs and the way that things happen. I am a proponent of a 16-team playoff among FBS teams, and people hate me for it. I don't care. I want it in because I think that everybody that has an opportunity or should have an opportunity ought to get the same opportunity to get ran by Bama, ought to get the same opportunity to get styled on by Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl with, my team, Oklahoma. What do you think of the prospect of a 16-team playoff or even a 24-team playoff at the FBS level from what you've seen and how it works at the FCS level?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea, and I mean the money certainly would be there. And I mean the thing is too, it sounds like the number one reason why the FBS doesn't want to expand the playoffs to a bigger format is they're worried about, oh, that's way too many games on a college football player. Well, you look at North Dakota State, throughout the 2010s, they were having 15 game schedules. They're having 16 game schedules. And these are teams, the FCS, they have 63 scholarships compared to 85 scholarships at the FBS level. And if the FCS teams that lack depth, they lack the scholarship and the numbers, if they can play a 24-team playoff, I think these FBS programs can as well. If not 24, then maybe 16. And it would be so great because at the FBS level, like I said, the money is there. They could have a true, a seeded tournament, so 1 through 16 or 1 through 24. Whereas the FCS, there's not a lot of money in the subdivision, so it's seeded 1 through 8, and then the other 16 are kind of paired up regionally to save up on travel costs. But so it's not a true, kind of a tournament seeded thing, but it still does, decide, clearly who is the best team in the subdivision. But yeah, if the FBS went 16 teams, they could seed it 1 through 16. And, I don't know, maybe the semifinals and the title game are at a neutral site, or, maybe even the quarterfinals, those 4 games are at neutral sites, and the first couple of rounds are at home. But I mean, that's a lot of ad revenue right there, I think, and a lot of money that I think these FBS programs could all have, and it would also, my guess is it would include Group of 5, and then there would be less worry about the Power 5 and the Group of 5, kind of splitting ways, because the Group of 5 feels a little left out to what the Power 5 is doing.
No, man, I mean you hit on it. Like, for me, I'm thinking about it from that standpoint of, one, you want to grow the pie, especially after this pandemic where everybody is losing money, right? So why wouldn't you want to add more games, and demonstrated at the FCS level that this works? But here's the thing. I believe that people are really testy about the idea of there only being like 3 or 4 teams, 3 most years, that are good enough to make it a good game in the semifinal and in the final. That said, man, how many times have you seen James Madison and North Dakota State be there at the end? I mean, how often do you see a musical chairs of some sort, or you just look at the matchups and you go, well, I'm going to pencil that team in, I'm going to pencil that team in, and it's fine. Like, does that not happen at the FCS level more often than not?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying, because, I mean, when you look at the 24-team FCS playoffs, usually it's, all right, NDSU is going to be in the championship game, and there are 1, 2, maybe 3 teams that challenge NDSU. But all these teams that didn't get a seed, that are playing in the first round, yeah, they're not good enough to win a national championship. There's no way. Like going back to the Pioneer Football League, San Diego, they've been in the playoffs every year as the auto bid. They're a really good program, but no one is looking at San Diego saying, yeah, this team could challenge for a national championship. It's just not realistic. San Diego making it to the second round, or maybe in the quarterfinals, that's considered, good for them. But yeah, so at the FBS level, it would be the same thing, where it's, okay, these are 4 or 5 teams that are legit national title contenders. These other 11, probably not going to happen. But at the same time, you at least give them a chance to. And even if one of those teams, maybe a group of 5 team, makes it to the quarterfinals, and it's that Group of 5 team and 7 other P5 teams, and even if that G5 team, loses in the quarterfinals and loses a lot to a team like Alabama, hey, they were there. I mean, that's great. That's great publicity for their program. So, yeah, at the FCS level, I mean, you can basically cancel out 75% of the field and say these guys aren't winning the national championship. But I mean, still, you give them an opportunity to go as deep as they can into the playoff bracket.
No, man, and I appreciate you saying that. I really do, because, like, who doesn't like Howard beating UNLV? Who doesn't like James Madison getting a win over North Carolina? I mean, when it happens, it's fun, and no harm, no foul. Like, everybody gets beat down, it's okay, and not everybody's going to be Bama or Georgia or Ohio State or Clemson or LSU or whatever. But no, I appreciate it. Sam Herder, follow him on Twitter, @SamHerder. Please donate to the Hero Sports website. I have outstanding work here, especially if you care at all, even a little bit, about FCS sports, football, basketball rankings. I mean, this tremendous list of payouts where I got to believe there's like, what, 70 open records requests here?
Yeah, so it was there's 114 FCS versus FBS games originally scheduled. We found about 73 of them. Some of them were just from internet searches. Some of them were just, reaching out and sending a message to the SID saying, hey, can I get that figure? And if you have, I have some decent relationships where they just sent that to me right away. Other ones are Freedom of Information Acts, and, they still make you jump through hoops. There are some programs that are weird about telling you the money figure.
Oh, yeah.
And some of these games are with private schools too, where they don't have to, they're not obligated to tell you the payout. And those ones where it's like, yeah, we're not going to spend, 3 hours trying to chase down this figure. So yeah, we got about 70 out of the 114. And I think that's, trying to get to 100% of those payouts was probably way too much of a task, but I'm happy that we got a good chunk of them, because it is interesting to see how, the payouts of all these games.
Man, I was raised by folks that raised in journalism by folks that taught me how to do that. And I got to tell you, I was floored by the work that you had done. I know how hard that is, and I know what it takes to put together a sheet like this. So bravo, man. Seriously. Thank you so much for this. This was way better than I thought it would be. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate you and the invite to come on the show. I certainly appreciate it, and I appreciate the plug as well that you did just now for herosports.com. Appreciate that.
Yeah, man.